The entropic disruptor hummed to a lethal pitch behind Kalen Voss. It was milliseconds away from scattering her atoms into the freezing void when a rough, uninvited voice echoed through the silent chamber. I invoke the right of sanctuary. If you love stories of humanity breaking impossible rules, make sure to subscribe and hear how this one ends. Let's step back to where the defiance began. That same suffocating ozone smell. Kalen had first noticed it 3 hours ago, kneeling on the polished floor of the Cosmic Synod, while her death warrant was finalized. Beneath the towering crystalline spires of Korthos 9, the Grand Gallery was packed with silent spectators. Representatives from 100 loyalist worlds sat in tiered seating, their breathing apparatuses and environmental suits hissing in a quiet, synchronized rhythm. Kalen Voss, matriarch of the Ethel, kept her 6 eyes locked straight ahead. Her once brilliant bioluminescence had faded to a sickly pale gray, drained by weeks in a freezing containment cell. She had committed the ultimate heresy against the ruling council. She had offered a home to 3 billion Goran refugees. The Goran were mutating, evolving far too rapidly for the council's rigid comfort. Under the absolute authority of the Edict of Stasis 404, any species exhibiting unpredictable genetic shifts was to be purged to preserve galactic equilibrium. Kalen had looked at their fleeing ships, felt the frantic terror radiating from their young, and chosen mercy over survival. Now, Grand Magistrate Luminarex floated directly above her. The massive entity of fractured light and sharp geometry projected absolute authority. The magistrate's voice echoed across the amphitheater, devoid of malice, anger, or pity. It was simply the machinery of the cosmos correcting a mathematical error. The sentence is dissolution. Kalen squeezed her eyes shut. Just a brief burn, then nothing. But the blinding heat never came. Instead, the heavy, suffocating silence of the synod was shattered by a sound that did not belong in the halls of the ancients. Footsteps, heavy, uneven, and utterly lacking in grace. A bipedal creature stepped out from the deep shadows of the observation gallery. He wore a patched synthetic jacket, his face marred by asymmetrical features and strange, coarse fur on his lower jaw. Corin Thane, a Terran. The Ethel matriarch did not know his name yet, nor did she understand the rough, mundane texture of his calloused palm as he slapped a worn, archaic datapad onto the polished synod railing. My name is Corin Thane, Captain of the Vagabond's Reach, the creature announced. His vocal cords produced a strange, unrefined resonance that grated against the acoustic perfection of the chamber. And I claim this woman as protected kin. Luminarex's crystalline facets flared a deep, warning crimson, the color of systemic violation. Your species is provisional, unrecognized. You possess no standing to invoke ancient law. Maybe not, Corin replied. He leaned heavily against the railing, completely unaffected by the paralyzing aura of the magistrate. But your own recognition protocols state that any species submitting a complete cultural archive must be granted a 100-cycle evaluation period. During that time, we hold provisional rights. Kalen watched the Terran press a single physical button on his device. The Synod's master consoles shrieked. A massive, unsanctioned data transfer flooded the chamber's central holographic projectors. Images of a blue-green world, of sprawling concrete cities, of bloody wars and triumphant scientific leaps, overwhelmed the sterile, highly regulated displays. The automated systems chimed. A robotic voice filled the hall, overriding the Grand Magistrate's commands. Archive accepted. Provisional evaluation initiated. The lethal hum of the entropic disruptor instantly died. The execution tethers binding Kalen's wrists snapped open, dropping her heavily to the cold metal floor. She stared up at the Terran, her 6 eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound confusion. He had just weaponized the bureaucracy of the gods. Humanity just bought an empire a temporary stay of execution, but the real war is about to begin. Join us to see how the Terrans use their 100 cycles. The air on the Vagabond's Reach smelled of stale coffee and recycled oxygen. Kalen walked the narrow metal corridor, her gaze catching on a single low-power overhead light that flickered in a chaotic, unpredictable rhythm. It was a fitting environment for her saviors. This ship was held together by scrap metal and stubbornness, much like the Terrans themselves. For 100 cycles, Corran Thane did not rest. He utilized his archaic datapad to broadcast the Synod's hidden history to the darkest corners of the galaxy, bypassing official channels through hidden smuggler relays. They transmitted the absolute truth about the Edict of Stasis 404. They showed the purged worlds, entire planets reduced to radioactive glass because their inhabitants dared to naturally evolve. They showed the Goran children, harmless and frightened, marked for death simply for existing. And then Corran showed Terran history. He displayed a messy, violent, but undeniably resilient record of survival. He showed a species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times over, yet always found the strength to rebuild from the ashes. He proved that stability was not a virtue if it required forced stagnation, and that true peace required the courage to change. Slowly, the quiet, oppressed systems of the galaxy began to listen. When the 100 cycles finally expired, Kaelin found herself standing in the Cosmic Synod once more. The entropic disruptor hummed its familiar, lethal pitch right behind her, waiting for the final verdict. The Grand Gallery was utterly silent, packed with the same loyalist spectators. "The evaluation is complete," Luminarex declared from its elevated dais. "The Terran archive demonstrates a capacity for uncontrollable destruction. The petition is rejected. Matriarch Voss will face her original sentence, and the Terrans are ordered into immediate containment." Corran simply smiled and tapped his worn datapad. Kaelin watched the magistrate's central matrix freeze as massive, unsanctioned spatial tears ripped open across the sector. She could almost see the ancient entity's rigid algorithms stalling on a single impossible calculation, which meant the lesser beings had somehow. The rebel fleet had arrived. Outgunned Terran cargo haulers, mining vessels, and retrofitted freighters dropped from faster-than-light travel. They positioned their fragile hulls directly between the pristine Synod armada and the gathered civilian crowds. When a Synod dreadnought fired its primary plasma cannons, a Terran-converted freighter called the Wandering Star intentionally rammed the volatile energy volley. Its reactor breached in a blinding flash to absorb the devastating blow meant for others. It was a level of irrational, catastrophic self-sacrifice that the cold, calculating logic of the Cosmic Synod could not process, and that brief moment of total algorithmic paralysis was all the opening the newly formed 17-species rebel armada needed to completely overrun the Grand Magistrate's flagship. Ethel cruisers, Goran defenders, and defecting Synod Guard ships overwhelmed the loyalist forces. The invincible Cosmic Synod was broken by a species that simply refused to stay down. The fighting ended. Kaelin stood beside Corran on the cargo hauler's observation deck, her bioluminescence glowing a fierce, steady gold. Beyond the reinforced glass, the void was no longer empty. The ancient datapad lay forgotten on a console, its tiny screen dwarfed by the massive, living archive of thousands of allied ships holding the line together. What would you sacrifice to rewrite the rules of the universe? Let us know below. We'll be back tomorrow with another chronicle from the void.